Hello, Medford community. I'm Brett Champion, the proud superintendent of schools here in the Medford School District. And welcome to Medford Anywhere Learning TV. We are so grateful to our partners who helped us bring Medford Anywhere Learning TV to life. And those include Southern Oregon PBS, KTVL, KDRV, and the Dove TV. Special shout out to Southern Oregon PBS for also producing these parts. In the Medford School District, we believe that all are learning, and learning is for all. And what better venue to share our learning than Medford Anywhere Learning TV. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Ivan Olinghouse, and I am a teacher here at Hedrick Middle School. And today I would like to share with you information about tuning and timbre. This is for all you musicians out there. What I'm going to talk about today, even though I'm a middle school teacher, is not necessarily just for middle school though. This applies to all musicians, especially those kindergarten through 12th grade. A lot of this information though is really geared towards you high schoolers as well though. We're going to get into some of the more technical aspects of tuning and timbre today. For a learning target, for example, be able to say, I can identify the natural overtone series, and I can apply just intonation to my music, and I can understand how timbre interacts with the voice. So a few things to get through today. The first off that I would like to start with is the natural overtone series that we have next to us here. This is a beautiful graph that shows you the first 16 partials. At the very bottom in the bass clef, you'll see the low C, followed by, that's C1 down there, followed by, I guess it's that C2, followed by C3, followed by G3, going up to C4 by the time you get over to the middle C on the treble clef. So underneath you'll see the partial numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., all the way on up on the bottom. And then next to the notes, you'll see the tuning system as well. We'll continue referring to this graph throughout the day. Here's what you need to know though. Anytime you make any kind of pitch whatsoever, it has overtones that appear as well in the audio spectrum above it that you can hear. To give you an example of this, when you go to Mongolia, for example, or the country of Tuva, and you hear the folks there that sing, they use what's called a throat singing style. And one of the things that's unique about the throat singing style is their use of nasal harmonics. Nasal harmonics are a way that we can hear all these overtones. So I'm going to sing a pitch right now, and then I'm going to do one of those horrible things where I'm going to make the most annoying sound possible. At least that's how it sounds to me. But then I'm going to change that sound, and what you're going to hear is these individual overtones popping out above it. So for that first pitch, I'm going to grab something that's a little bit higher. You can hear this a little better if it's something a little bit higher at first, if you want to play around with this at home, and hopefully nobody else is around to hear you do this, because this is weird sounding. The first one is, and I'm making an NG kind of sound. So the foundation pitch is la, but what you're also hearing above it is a whole bunch of, that's what the number 1 is over there. And as you move up through the overtone, you'll hear a second pitch popping up. And what I'm doing is I'm emphasizing I'm increasing the decibels or the loudness volume of those individual overtones as they're moving up through the spectrum. So that first one, there's number 2. There's number 3. There's number 4. 5. 6. 7. And 8. It starts getting a little harder here at that pitch, because what's happening is those frequencies are getting higher and higher in the human spectrum of hearing. We can only hear up to about 20,000 hertz and only down to about 20 hertz on that spectrum. If you think about A440 above middle C, the A above middle C, that's at 440 hertz. And each time you go up an octave, that hertz doubles in size. So it goes from 440 up to 880 for A5. and then a 6 would be 1660 or 1760, I suppose. As you go down from A440, the A above middle C, so if you go to the A below middle C, it halves it. Goes from 440 down to 220, and then from 220 down to 110, down to 55, down to 27.5, and so on and so forth. So that's how we measure pitch. But we're not really here to talk so much about pitch today as what's happening to the overtones happening above the pitch. Why is this important? Because if you understand the overtone series, it'll help you get a grip on what timbre is. And timbre is, it's a funny word, it's spelled Timbre. It looks like the word timber with the R and the E flipped around at the end. Timbre is the way that we describe sound. So we can have dark timbre, light timbre. You'll hear other people as a bright timbre. There's lots of different descriptors that we can use for this. So for example, a dark timbre might be that kind of Coke bottle sound that you hear. So if we're going to sing that, we might go, oh, you get that kind of really airy sound. Lots of space in the mouth will get you very dark overtones. What does a dark overtone mean, or a dark timbre? It means the lowest frequencies in the overtone series are the ones that are the most exaggerated. As we brighten the timbre, we start changing how loud the higher frequencies will sound. So if we use that same pitch, la, dark timbre, oh, versus super bright timbre, e, that change in timbre changes the spectrum. And you can hear it when you modulate through the vowels. So if you take the typical like A, E, A, U, U thing kind of, A, E, A, O. What actually happened is I could reorganize those into this range instead, from brightest to darkest. E, A, O. Now, what I just did is expressed it from the brightest overtones down to the darkest overtones. But this time I'm going to kind of slide my way through. I'm going to do a portamento in timbre rather than in pitch. E, and what's weird about that, it's sort of hard to hear, but you can hear when you listen carefully those overtones fluctuating from bright to dark, back to bright. It's a wonderful thing to play around with yourself. Okay, let's get into some application. Why do we care about timbre? What's the difference? Well, something you should know is that individual vowels that we say have different brightnesses or color to them. So the vowel U has a very dark timbre. The vowel E has a very bright timbre. You might want to know that because it's going to change how you want to interact with those vowels depending on the complexity of your level of singing. How do we apply this in a more general way, though? Let's say we wanted to become a professional singer, and this could be true for any instrumentalist. Different types of singing or different genres of singing require different timbres. So, for example, in a lot of pop music genres, you might get really bright timbres like, whoa, my soul, my darling. Now, if you took that really bright timbre, we could change that. Let's change it a little bit and pull it back to a darker timbre, and you might get a little more of like a classical leader kind of sound. So something like, oh, my love, my darling. Let's pull it back even further now. I'm going to add more space, and I'm going to continue darkening up this timbre. Oh, my love, my darling. So right now I started off on the brightest side of the overtone series, and right now I'm somewhere in the middle where the loudest overtones are popping out. Let me get closer and closer to opera. So another real bright genre I should mention would be like musical theater. We use a lot of really bright timbres in musical theater. But the closer you get to classical music, typically the darker the timbres to get In general, there are exceptions, like when you sing Renaissance music. But as you get closer to the real heavy romantic music, you're going to get darker and darker with the timbres until finally you get to the point like you got operatic kind of timbres like, "Whoa, my soul." You can really change the timbre by doing that. There's a lot that physiologically needs to happen, though, to change the timbre, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about today. In the voice, and this is especially for you vocal folks out there, the voice has a lot of what you might think of as hinges. Hinges in terms of ways that we can, or maybe you might think a slider that moves up and down to be able to change that timbre. So as I sing, let's say a single vowel, I could change the timbre of that single vowel. Let me take the ah vowel, one of the more neutral ones. Ah. I'm going to brighten that up even more. Ah. That's a very bright ah, super, super high frequency timbre. Let's darken it up now. Ah. So there's a lot of things that fluctuate and shift as we're changing that timbral sound. How do we do that? What are the specific hinges? Well, there's a few. Let's start one by one. The first one is verticality of the jaw. How open is your jaw? This is really important for singers. The more classical music that you get into, typically the more you're going to open up that jaw. Unless we're, again, talking about, if we go all the way back into the 1600s, that's when we start closing it back up a little bit. We'll tighten that sound up. But in general, if we open up the jaw, now what you'll notice is that there's a point of diminishing return. You can always overdo something. There's always balance in what we do as musicians. You try and go too extreme one way, and what you're going to run into is you're going to fall off the cliff the other side. We have to find that middle ground in what we do. So let's get to instead of, we always want to think about singing with the most beautiful sound that we can. Same thing applies for all instruments. You always want to play with the most appropriate, beautiful sound you can. So let's do that same ah. We'll darken it up, but without going overboard. Now those different jaw motions are going to change which genre you might want. So I'm going to go from pop to musical theater to lieder to operatic. The jaw is one of those hinges, and you can find the balance point that you need. Another hinge that you have that is really helpful is the lips. Now the lips actually have two separate hinges. One of them goes out to the sides, and the other one opens vertically. So let's play around with those for a moment. The first one, for ah, we typically want to think about having more of an O shape which turns more oval. Oh. All right, let's just do it mostly with the lips. I'm going to sing with the most beautiful jaw position first, since we kind of already figured out where we want that. And I'm going to go for a nice middle of the road jaw placement. Oh. You can hear the change in the timbre depending on how far open the lips open this way. What about this way, though? The further the lips open this way, the more bright the sound's going to get. The closer the lips are, the darker the sound's going to get. Oh. And something that's interesting about what's happening in my timbre right now is I'm shooting right now, if you look at the numbers, I'm going for about the 6th overtone, the G that's in the middle of, on the second line of the treble clef staff. So that particular G sounds like this. I'm going for that overtone. A lot of music that sounds beautiful in a classical sense is going to shoot for that overtone, the G, up to about the B flat, that really flat B flat. And we'll talk about the tuning later on that. Okay, back to the hinges. So we've got the jaw, we have lips in two different ways. Let's do the next one. Let's talk about the tongue. Where is the tongue going to be? Well, the tongue can be back, down in the throat, or it could be forward. I'm going to use a real extreme version of this for you right now. As I went through that, I'm sorry for sticking my tongue out at you, you'll hear that it went from super ugly as it went all the way down to the throat and started choking off the sound to really, really bright and obnoxious as you're sticking the tongue all the way out. One of the ideal places to keep the tongue is if you keep the tip of the tongue behind the lower teeth. Oh. Now, there's some funny things about the tongue. The tongue is an amazing muscle. It's, I think, the largest single muscle in the human body. And that muscle can change shape in a lot of ways. You can flatten the tongue out, or you can make it more cylindrical in shape. That's another way that the tongue can change the timbre. So the more you flatten it out, the brighter the timbre gets. The more you make it cylindrical, the more dark the timbre gets. And again, we're looking for a middle ground. What's the most beautiful part of this hinge? We want to find that sweet spot where the tongue is actually just relaxed. The more relaxed that tongue can be on the bottom, the better off you are. Now, you may need to change what the middle of the tongue is doing, because the tongue, you have the tip of the tongue here, the back of the tongue, the base of the tongue. The middle of the tongue can also move up, as can the front of the middle of the tongue. So you have a couple other vowels that you're going to end up playing with in there, and those are also hinges that can change the timbre. There's a ton of these. Something to play around with. What are some of the other hinges? Well, another one is, in my opinion, what you do with the glottal. The glottal is, I can close off my throat. If I take a real big sip of air and I try and hold it, I can relax everything in my mouth, and I can hold that air in my throat. And what I'm doing is I'm closing off the air in my throat. And what I can tell you about the glottal is you want this one to be as relaxed as possible. Too much tension, it brightens up the timbre and really just turns it into a horribly ugly sound. And part of what's happening is it's the very base or the back of the tongue is closing that throat off, is what's happening in part with that. So just know that these are all hinges that you can play with to adjust your timbre so that you can change where you want to hit on the frequency. And again, I want to emphasize the brightest parts of the overtones, that the ones that you want to hear the most, is around that 6-7 range. That's where a lot of singers aim for in terms of their timbral production as a general middle ground. Depending on what word you're singing or what vowel you're singing, you're going to have to change you could just by changing from an E to an O, it's going to have a massive change on where that frequency is going to be hitting the hardest on the overtones. All right. One thing that we haven't talked about, though, that is really important, that applies to everything that we do, whether you're a woodwind instrument player, whether you're a brass player, whether you're a singer, is breath. Breath is incredibly important behind all of this, because one thing that will take away from your timbre is being tense. That will reduce the quality of your timbre, especially as a singer. It's true for all instruments, but the more relaxed you are, typically the better sound that you'll get. So always remember to sit with a strong posture, like as though you were standing up, and then if you're going to sit down on something, you relax down onto it. Make sure that your spine, you could roll your back up so that your spine is stacked vertically on top of each other. Roll your shoulders back. You don't want to pin back, bring them back to a neutral, relaxed position so that your chest is open. The reason why you want this is because the lungs actually hang in this portion of our body. And you don't want to constrict those or reduce the amount of air you can get by collapsing inward or having some sort of really awkward, bizarre posture or having a lot of tension. With that relaxed posture, you also want to think about where the neck and the head are. You want the head to be as though there's a string that goes all the way from your spine up through the ceiling. That string is holding you upright, and that's going to help relax your posture. Once you're there, one thing that you can do to make sure that you're very relaxed, if you're not sure if you're relaxed, is flex every possible muscle you possibly can, and then relax. The longer you flex them, the more your body will naturally want to relax into a more neutral position. As long as you're sitting with good posture and your body is squarely over the top of your hips, and if you're standing, your feet are slightly staggered, that will get you great posture. The difference in sound is this. I'm going to try and sing something decent with my voice, but I'm going to modify only my posture now to adjust the timbre. You hear that it changed a lot of aspects. A crunched or collapsed posture reduces the airflow. It adds tension into the muscle systems. And because especially for you singers, you have to remember that your vocal folds are attached to the entirety of your muscular system. They are part of your body. So these are just some food for thought, things to play around with when it comes to playing with timbre in your voice. These same things could be played with, and when you're thinking about timbre and the overtone series, can be applied to any instrument, and to try and figure out what's the best sound. Even percussion instruments, where you're trying to figure out what's the best sounding percussion instrument, part of that is figuring out how that percussion instrument sounds timbrally. All right, let's get into the next portion of this, which is talking, we talked a little bit about timbre, and we've talked a bit about introducing the overtone series, but let's also talk about tuning. Now for the overtone series, I haven't played it for you yet. I'm going to do my best to sing through it right now. And no, I'm not starting on a low C. I can't sing that low, not quite. I'm going to start on the bottom of the overtone series though, and I'm going to transpose this for you. And I'm going to move up through the overtone series so you can hear where each of those pitches are with a more stable foundational pitch. Keep in mind, as I sing through each pitch, there's actually a whole nother overtone series that's popping up as I change which foundational pitch I'm singing on. So here's the frequency number 1, 2, and I'm not going to go much higher than that. I'm not going to go up through 13, 14, 15, 16 so much. Those overtones are all, that series is all based off of that original pitch. All those other pitches I sang are also happening at the same time. There's really cool, you can get little spectral analysis apps on your phone for free that you can download. There's a whole bunch of them out there, and you can actually observe your overtones. So if you're not sure where your timbre is hitting the strongest, you can use one of those spectral overtone maps to help you figure out where your timbre is hitting if you want to get techie with it. All right, the last thing for today is a bit of math and music. We've always said that math and music go together, and that's getting into the tuning of the overtone series. Something that you should know is there is a big difference between how a piano is tuned versus the natural overtone series and how those pitches are tuned. A piano, we tune a piano to something called equal temperament tuning. And what that means is that the distance between each pitch, each half step on the piano from C to C sharp to D sharp to E, we measure it in cents. And on the piano, we standardized it. We said we picked an arbitrary amount and we call it 1 cent. And it takes 100 cents to go from one half step to the next, from a C to a C sharp. Now, those other numbers that are popping up here on the graph, those are referring to cents. So you'll see on the very first one, there is nothing above it. Why? Because it's neutral. We could also write a 0 there. Number 2, the octave above it, the C, that's also a 0 because the octaves are pretty much in tune with each other. There is some slight variation, but not enough for us to map in here. The third partial, though, you'll see it has +2 above it. That +2 means we need to raise it 2 cents. Keep in mind there's 100 cents in between each half step. So 2 cents is 1/50th of a half step. Kind of mind-blowing there. And what that means is whenever you create that foundational pitch, that bottom C, C2, when you get to G3, that G3 naturally occurs 2 cents higher relative to the piano. A lot of math there. I should mention, just for kicks and giggles, those of you who love math history, it's actually the person who started to figure all this out was actually Pythagoras. All the way back into the BC era. I can't remember exactly when he was. I want to say 400 BC. It might be around Pythagoras' time. Pythagoras, the story is he was walking down a street and he heard blacksmiths working with anvils. And the anvils were different sizes. And as they hit the anvils, they resonated with different pitches. But on anvils, you can really hear the overtones pop out really strongly. And so he started noticing, oh, hey, there's these other notes that are popping out above this. And he tried mapping them out mathematically. And what's really interesting, too, is that these overtone series also happen to follow a Fibonacci sequence. If you map them from high to low, it starts making us, if you took these and started, like, for example, when you see the seashells and they start making the spirals, you could map these overtones out, and they also match up with that Fibonacci sequence that you see in fractals all over in nature. It's really fascinating if you're a math geek like me for that stuff. All right, so from Pythagoras, he noticed that there's these overtones. He was the one who originally tried mapping these out. However, he got really close. He wasn't exactly on. Nowadays, we have better measurements, and we were able to more closely calibrate these numbers, and that's where these numbers come from, is us being able to take a digital tuner and being able to find out where these frequencies are. So as we go up through the frequencies, we talked about G3 over here being the third partial being 2 cents high. It so happens that 2 cents is the smallest increment that the human ear can discern or hear the difference between. And I'm not even going to try and map that out for you with my voice, because even the natural vibrato in my voice tends to fluctuate beyond 2 cents. But if I had to, I could try and emulate it. I might say it might be the difference between and virtually no difference. 2 cents could even be, if you change the timbre on a note, you can actually make it sound like it's in tune just by changing the timbre, even though the pitch frequency doesn't actually match. You can actually trick the human ear into believing something's in tune, even when it's not, by making it sound like it's perfectly in timbre. There's a lot of fun experiments out on that you can check out online. All right. For the tuning sequence here, as you go up, you'll see there's different numbers, and those apply. Those are the numbers that you want to tune to if you use a digital tuner. But other than that, I hope you had a little bit of fun today. Hope this brought a little new knowledge to you. And for MSTV, I want to say thank you.
Thank you for joining us today on Medford Anywhere Learning TV for the latest updates on what's going on in the Medford School District, including COVID-19 updates, as well as next steps for Medford Anywhere Learning, because there's always more still to come. Check out our website at www.medford.k12.or.us. See you soon.